Hello, today I'm going to show you how to make your Silly Millie dragon kit. If you don't have one already, you can get them online at claysquared.com. You'll have everything in here to make this little dragon sculpture, so I'll show you how to do it. First of all, you've got your little tinfoil form. This is what is inside of your dragon. In the end, you won't be able to see this tinfoil at all. You can kind of squish it if you want to different kind of poses, but that can even come after you've added the clay. So you've also got a large Silly Millie. This Silly Millie is going to get sliced up and put all over the body of your dragon. So start with that Silly Millie. It's large, so if you want to, you can roll it smaller. So sometimes they're a little bit harder and they might need a little bit of warming up, but generally it's going to be ready to go. I'm going to make this one just a little bit smaller. Smaller meaning smaller in diameter, but longer actually. So just kind of roll it, or you can stretch it a little bit by pulling it like that. And then you're going to slice it up. You'll use your slicing tool with two hands. If you've got this kind of Silly Millie slicing tool, you'll notice that the flaps are up to find the slicing part down, and always hold it with two hands. I'm going to slice it pretty thin, about the thickness of a nickel, maybe a little thinner. It's good to slice thin because then you get more out of it. So I'll slice it, I'll just slice it all the way up. You can see how I'm kind of scooting it away from itself so that it doesn't stick to each slice. Just like that. Slice it all up. You'll have all your slices. Sometimes it sticks to your slicing tool, but you don't need to pop it off. You can just keep on slicing. It'll pop off on its own. And as you can see, you've got a whole bunch of little designs. Mine has a fish. So I'm going to take these little slices, and I can spread them out if I want to, but generally they're going to get all just added on to your little tinfoil form. Kind of carefully placing it so that it kind of puzzle pieces together. And I'm not too worried about getting every little spot covered, because the clay will squish and form into each one of those little crevices when I roll it. But I am being very careful to not overlap too much. When you overlap, you're kind of wasting your Silly Millie. But sometimes you just have to. Sometimes it doesn't quite puzzle piece together. Sometimes I can even sort of stretch it, maybe make it into a shape that fits into that little empty space. As you can see, I'm trying to get all that tinfoil completely covered. Sometimes you can take your slices, if you got them too thick, kind of squish them with your fingers and make them bigger. Just wrapping it around. Now, as you can see, I'm ended up with a little spot that's not quite the perfect size. But I can always take one of these little slices and maybe chop it smaller. And that makes it fit in there a little bit better. I'm not too worried. If I get a little spot like that, I might be able to just pinch it together to get it to completely cover. I'm just covering it all. Then eventually I will roll it a bit. If you have an official rolling pin, you can use that, like an official clay rolling pin. But what also works is a Crayola marker. So I'm just getting it all covered. Should have plenty of Silly Millie. You might even have a little bit extra that you can play with later, maybe turn into some beads. But if you run short, you'll just want to stretch those Silly Millies so they can go all the way around. When I get to the tail, I'm just gonna wrap it right around. If you ever notice your Silly Milly sort of cracking a little bit, that might mean that it needs to get warmed up just a little bit more. So each slice you might want to pick it up and just sort of squish it like this. I'm not having that problem with mine much, but it does happen every once in a while. It just means maybe the Silly Milly is a little bit cold, or it was made quite a while ago and it needs a little bit of sort of movement and warmth to get it going. So now you see I've got a couple little spots. One thing I could do is I could take little bits. That's an easy way to fill it in if it's a big spot. If it's a little spot, just squeezing it together, or maybe even when you use your rolling pin or your little Crayola marker, you can just sort of roll it together there. By the way, Crayola brand Crayola markers like this really are the best. I've used different brands, but with other brands, a lot of times the paint will come off. I'm not sure why that is, but I've definitely found that the Crayola brand is a good one for a rolling pin. Sometimes even just a pen, like a writing pen or something like that. Anything that's sort of cylindrical like this. But you can see a Crayola pen, Crayola marker actually works really well. So it's up to you. Make it as smooth as you want, or if you want to, leave it kind of lumpy. One thing you don't want to do is kind of smear it and press it like that, because that's gonna make your design go away. I mean, I always say, you know, if you want that look, that's fine. But if you really want your Silly Milly to show up, it's better to kind of just do pressure with your rolling pin or straight down pressure with your fingers. So there we are, we got it all covered. I have a little bit of my Silly Milly left. Might be able to play around with that. Now I'm gonna make the legs. So the legs, you're gonna use these 3 solid colors that you got in your kit. You're gonna roll them into little worms, just like that. Well, let's see, this one color's a little bit harder. I'm using my hands. Hands are the best because they've got the warmth. So, rolling into little worms. These are gonna be fun colors for legs. Then I take these 3 little worms and I'm gonna layer them together and give them a twist. And I can twist it, twist it, and twist it. You can see how I can get that like that. Now, it's cracking a little bit, but that's okay. Now I'm gonna just fold it. I can warm it a little bit more. Twist it a little bit more. What you're doing here is you're marbleizing the colors. You're making them sort of swirl together. Sometimes one color will hide in the middle of the 2 other colors, but it's all in there. Fold and twist until you think it looks pretty swirly. You really don't know until you slice it open and inside, because sometimes, like I said, colors hide. So that's pretty cool. Maybe I'll just stick that together like that. Now, what I need is to divide this up for the legs and the hands. I might have more than enough. Sometimes there's more than enough. So I'm gonna take off 2 sort of thick pieces for the legs, and then I just need 2 thinner pieces for the hands. So I do have extra. You know, you can kind of play around with it, see how much you want. For the hands, I'm going to take my little sort of slice that I did here. It depends on what shape it is. It might be more round, might be more oval, but I want to pinch it into a little triangle sort of shape like that. And then you're going to make the little fingers. What you've got for a tool that works really well is your card from your Silly Milly tag. And you're gonna just go chop, chop, and there you go. You've got little fingers. You can spread them out a little bit, give them a little pinch. There's your little fingers. And you can stick it right on your little guy. Make him have whatever kind of pose you want. And you do that with the other little hand. And take your little Silly Milly tag, Make those little marks, little dents. Actually, you're cutting all the way through. Pinch it like crazy. Make those little fingers, and then stick the other arm on. Oh, it's starting to come to life. Now for your back leg, you've got this sort of like oval or circle. And what you're gonna do is kind of make it a little bit longer, like a little bit of a rectangle. And then what I call this is doing a dog bone. So you're gonna pinch it a little bit like a dog bone. And then one side gets flattened, and the other side, we're gonna twist it a little bit, okay? So really both sides are getting flattened. One is a little flatter than the other, and that's like kind of like the haunches, and then the other side is a foot. So see how that little twist made it so he can stand? I'm gonna do the same thing with my toes. Just like that. Spread those toes out, pinch a little bit. There's a little leg. You can see how I'm sort of setting him down and getting it like that. Now he needs one more leg, so I'm gonna do the same thing again. Pinch, sort of, well, dog bone, pinch, flatten, twist. That's ready for my little toes again. Make those little toe slots, spread those toes. You know, you could really play around with this. If you wanted to, you could even make little toenails. It's kind of up to you. Maybe use a little piece of your leftover Silly Milly if you have it. So there he goes. He's kind of standing up nicely. Now, all he needs is his eyes and his spikes and his smile. So for spikes, I've got a little piece. It's gonna be actually probably about this long for your spikes. And you're gonna take that and you're gonna pinch it into a tent. So it's kind of like you're turning the end into a little triangle, but it's not just the end, you're doing it all the way down to the other end. So you're making a nice little pinch. And you can stretch it a little bit too. If you stretch it, you'll get smaller spikes and you'll get more spikes. So there's my little spikes. They're ready to slice. I'm gonna slice these thicker than I did the Silly Milly. So see how thick I'm doing? So these will be little spikes all the way down to the end. And then all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put those spikes all along his back, starting on the top of his head. Just press them on there. They stick really easily. The thing with polymer clay is you'll find it sticks when you want it to stick. You don't have to press really hard. You know, just a little bit of pressure. And it's a little tricky going around that little tail there. And I'm gonna put on my spikes, and you know, if you're up for something different than these kind of spikes, you feel free. There's all kinds of different ways you could put spikes on. But there he is, and I've got a couple extra. So he's ready for his eyes. You've got his little eyes that came in the packet. Just be careful, they're not baked, they're still soft, so you don't want to squish his eyes. You're gonna put him right on his head, make him looking any way you want. And now all he needs is a little smile. Now you've got this black clay and you really have way more than you need. You really just need a little pinch, but it's kind of extra that you could play around with. Sometimes people are creative and come up with different things they can do with their little extra black. I'm gonna roll that into a little tiny worm, and maybe only just need a little bit of it. Let's even take this little end that's very skinny. My guy doesn't need a very big smile. And I'm gonna stick it right on there. I kind of already have a little dent that's waiting. There he goes. One more detail if you want. If you've got a toothpick handy or even like a tip of a pen or a pencil, you could poke little nostrils. And there he is. So he's ready to go in the oven. You'll want to make sure that you preheat your oven to 275. Give it maybe 5 or 10 minutes before you put your little guy in. And then you can put them in just like on a piece of paper, or parchment paper is fine if you have that. And you put them on a pan and on the paper. Let him bake for 30 minutes and then let him cool off before you play with him or move him around, because he's going to be very soft right when he comes out of the oven. But as he sits and cools, that's when he hardens. And then you'll be ready to have a little critter to keep you company. Have fun.